Much of the Middle East was always and has become increasingly hostile to the idea of independent journalism. The World Movement for Democracy would like to use this Democracy Carriage tribute to honor the bravery of independent journalists and defenders of free speech who remain committed to press freedom despite persecution and great personal risk.
Almost every week, if not every month, there's a new video that emerges of an Iraqi activist, civil society leader or journalist being either arrested or killed, assassinated.
في مصر أكثر من 600 موقع إلكتروني مراقب ومحجوب، وكان من أبرز هذه المواقع وأولها هو الموقع الخاص بصحيفة التحرير اللي كانت إسراء بشكل مباشر مسؤول عنه.
Your word, your own word, it's your right. It's not a lecture.
To those who paid the ultimate price, to my friend Hisham al-Hashimi. Hisham al-Hashimi was my friend, an Iraqi journalist, researcher, commentator, who was very active, based in Baghdad. He's from Baghdad. He was interested in politics, security studies, and really just trying to understand why his country was unable to develop in a way towards stability, towards security. If you read most reports, particularly in the security sector of Iraq, you'll see Hisham's fingerprints. You'll see his legacies. A better understanding of some of the armed groups in Iraq. You know, he became famous for understanding of Daesh and how Daesh was, and then he moved to work on other groups as well, including the Popular Mobilization Units and other groups throughout the country. So in terms of, he has an impact in academia for people who have tried to understand Iraq, but he also had an impact if you look at on the ground. Many of the young, I remember when I used to walk with Hisham around, there would be some student, some kid show up, Dr. Hisham, you know, and I'd ask him later, how do you know him? He's like, oh, I just taught him in a course. If you look at the posters, he's considered one of the martyrs of the October 2019 revolution. And it became normal for him to receive death threats, as many of these militias viewed him as the embodiment of both the elite, but also of giving information, particularly to foreigners, but also supporting the protesters, and most importantly, connected to the Iraqi government. The video is there. You can see there's a video very clearly what happened. He saw some people, and on his way home, just outside his home, and caught on camera, the assassins came and you know, shot him in his car, and his wife and kids, 3 boys, come out and see, you know, their father shot and bloody, and he later died in the hospital. Those who killed him have not been caught.
To those who lost their freedom. To my friend إسراء عبد الفتاح. إسراء زيها زي أغلبنا كانت طول الوقت مؤمنة إن الثورة ديت هتنجح. دعوتها للمشاركة في 2011 كان هدفها الأساسي ورؤيتها كانت الأساسية إن الناس يبقى عندها وعي كبير جدا بحقوقهم القانونية والدستورية. طبعا ما ننساش إن إسراء عملها الأساسي لما بدأت كان بتشتغل في المجتمع المدني، بعدها انتقلت للعمل الصحفي في صحيفة وموقع التحرير، كانت مسؤولة عن المحتوى الإلكتروني في الموقع. طبعا إسراء مرت بتجربة صعبة جدا خلال عملها في صحيفة التحرير، نظرا لأن السلطات المصرية مارست رقابة مباشرة على كل الصحف والمواقع الإلكترونية، وتم حجب موقع التحرير، بالإضافة أن الصحيفة نفسها تم منعها من الصدور. إسراء اتقبض عليها يوم 12 أكتوبر 2019. تم توقيف سيارتها والقبض عليها من قبل أفراد في زي مدني. إسراء ظلت في حالة من حالات الاختفاء القسري لفترة طويلة، اتعرضت ليها لكل صنوف التعذيب اللي ممكن حد يتعرض لها. قاموا بتعليق إسراء من يديها وتعذيبها وضربها بشكل عنيف جدا، حتى ان آثار الضرب والتعذيب كانت على جسمها لما تم عرضها تاني يوم امام النيابة، واللي حتى الآن لم يتم انصاف إسراء فيها ولم يتم تقديم الجناة للقضاء حتى الآن، رغم أن شدة الإجراءات المفروضة على إسراء وأنها لا تلتقي بأي شخص ولا تتريض ولا تحصل على الحقوق الدنيا. في 2020 اتفاجئنا أن إسراء تم ضمها لقضية جديدة، هي القضية 855، واللي متهمة فيها إسراء بالانضمام لجماعة إرهابية للقيام بجريمة إرهابية من داخل السجن. قضية جديدة تبدو شديدة العبثية، بتثبت أن السلطات المصرية عازمة على استخدام القانون وتوظيفه بأي شكل ضد المدافعين عن حقوق الإنسان والصحفيين، واللي إسراء واحدة منهم بتدفع ثمن غالي وكبير بسبب نضالها السلمي من أجل الديمقراطية والحرية.
To those who continue to struggle, to the Syrian Center for Media and Freedom of Expression, to SCM.
In a shortcut, I'd say SCM is a vision of a man. His name is Mazen Darwish. He decided to create SCM as a space where he can do support for political prisoners, for journalists, monitor freedom in Syria. The situation of journalism in Syria forced us a lot to rethink about those new terms, about who's the journalist, who's the media worker, who's the media activist, who's, you know. Men and women after 2013 start to face the danger of being targeted from all parties. So military group called Jaish al-Islam is accused of being in charge of kidnapping Razan Zaitouni and Nazem Hammadi and Wael Hammadi and Samira al-Khalil. And ISIS responsible for kidnapping a lot of women media workers and men, Samar Saleh, and government continue to do what they always did, target journalists and media workers, caricaturian, and everyone.
What's unique about Hisham is the fact that he was very knowledgeable and he had a lot of data that he was sharing with everybody, and especially the journalists who report on Iraq. They used him as a main source for information that is very hard to get by. And given that he is so easy to access and he was so open to share his knowledge, he impacted most of the reportings done on extremist and jihadist groups in Iraq and Syria. And that impact has been so big that you see these days after his departure, most of the reports are not as adequate as it used to be, given that Hisham was alive. He was very much loved by everyone, and that made it easy for people to talk to him, and he made it easy to relate to him. His appearances on TV stations and frequently on Arabic channels, especially the satellite channels, he was frequented on almost all the major satellite stations, and he made the news richer. People and the who's who of Iraq used to follow what he says and listen to what he says. The impact that he had was absolutely immense. And for me, I've seen a lot of people get assassinated, get killed in Iraq, but I have not seen the outpour of grief and anger of Hisham's assassination. And that only is a testament to what Hisham represented to the international community, as well as to the media community, for what he has offered and what he was doing on the field.
Let me start by thanking the World Movement for Democracy for this award on behalf of Isra Abdel Fattah and at least 26 other journalists who were in jail at the end of last year because of their work, according to the count of the Committee to Protect Journalists. Isra has been in jail now since 2019 in October, after demanding that the Egyptian government release political prisoners, at least 4,000 at the time, who protested against the government corruption. That has been the story of her life before she impressed the world as being the Facebook girl who mobilized Egyptians to topple former Egyptian President Mohammed Hosni Mubarak in 2011. She has impressed Egyptians with mobilizing the first national strike using only social media and Facebook. Hundreds of thousands stayed home in support for the labor workers in 2008. Her movement that she co-founded, April 6th movement, had not just been able to pressure the government on corruption, but on issues that have to do with political freedom and freedom of speech. And she has been imprisoned in many ways because of her defense about those who've been held in custody arbitrarily. And now, in her latest detention, she had made allegation that she was tortured in custody. And even though the prosecutor have said they will look into those allegations, a year and a half later, nothing has happened. We, as Egyptian activists and also as journalists, have been inspired by Israa Al-Fattah since 2008, and her courage and sacrifice helped carry many favors for people who have been demanding democracy in Egypt and around the Arab region. We hope that her courage and sacrifice will inspire you to continue to demand her release today and to hold those who might have tortured her in custody accountable for what they did.